Have you ever trusted the wrong people for just a few hours and realized too late that your child paid the price for it? The text hit my phone at 2:17 p.m. I came home. I hope I'm not in trouble. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notification bell for updates. That was it. One sentence. Calm. Too calm. The kind of message that makes your stomach drop before your brain even catches up. I was standing in the hallway outside the conference room, half reading email, half listening for my name to be called back in when I saw it, and I swear the world went quiet around me. My daughter had turned 11 that day. Her name is Lily. She was the kind of kid who still believed birthdays were supposed to feel magical. Even if the magic was something small, pancakes cut into hearts, a candle stuck into a grocery store cupcake, a cat with too much glitter, she noticed everything, remembered everything, and that morning she had been glowing. I'm Vanessa, 36, a single mother, and I should tell you this up front. I am not reckless with my daughter. I do not leave her with people I don't trust. At least I thought I didn't. The plan for that day had seemed simple, safe, ordinary. My parents, Richard, 68, and Eliane, 65, had invited Lily over for a birthday lunch while I finished a half day at work. They lived less than 15 minutes away on foot. It was a routine Lily knew well, a quiet suburban stretch with crosswalks, trimmed edges, and a kind of neighborhood where people still pretended nothing truly bad could happen in broad daylight. My mother had insisted on it, actually. She's 11 now, Eliana had said a few days earlier, smiling in that tight way she had when she wanted credit for generosity. That's old enough to feel grown up. Let her come to us. We'll make it special. And Lily believed her. That morning, she stood in the kitchen in a pale yellow dress she had picked out herself 3 days earlier. She asked me twice if it was too fancy for lunch at Grandma and Grandpa's, then changed her shoes because she wanted the outfit to look more birthday-ish. She helped me pack a little tin of sugar cookies she decorated the night before. The icing was uneven, the sprinkles were everywhere, and she was proud of every single one. She even bought one of her gifts with her, not to open there, to show off. The detail still gets me because children don't bring their happiness to people unless they believe it will be safe there. Looking back, the wearing signs were already in place. They just didn't look dramatic enough at the time. They never do. My parents weren't the kind of people who screamed in public or threw plates or gave you one giant moment you could point to say, there, that's the evil. No, they were quieter than that, sharper. They specialized in correction disguised as concern, humiliation disguised as principle. Everything had a lesson inside it. According to them, every kindness had terms. Every invitation had an invisible condition attached. But I had spent so many years managing them that I could mistake predictability for safety. As Lily was getting ready to leave, I remember hesitating near the door, just for a second. A tiny pause. I almost ignored. My mother had made a strange comment on the phone 2 nights earlier when we confirmed the birthday plan. Children need to learn respect early, she said. At the time, I assumed she was talking in one of her usual vague, superior ways. I didn't ask what she meant. I should have. Lily adjusted the ribbon in her hair and asked, "Do you think Grandma will like the cookies?" I smiled. I told her yes. That answer would haunt me before the day was over. She left just after noon with her little gift bag swinging at her side, excited that pure, unguarded way only kids can be when they still expect adults to behave like adults. I watched her from the window until she turned the corner, and then I grabbed my keys and headed to work, telling myself everything was fine. Everything was not fine. What I learned later came in fragments. At first, Lily arrived at my parents' house early. She rang the bell. My father opened the door. No smile, no happy birthday, no warm hello, just the hard expression he got when he had already decided someone needed to be taught something. My mother stepped into a view behind him with her arms folded. Lily smiled anyway. "I'm here." And my mother looked at her and said, "You can't come in today." Lily thought it was a joke at first. That might be the cruelest part. She gave this uncertain little laugh, waiting for one of them to smile to say, "Got you," to pull her into the ridiculous birthday surprise. Instead, my father said, "Go home." No explanation, no concern, no call to me, just a child on a doorstep in a birthday dress, being treated like she had arrived where she didn't belong. Later, when I asked Lady what she said after that, she stared at the table and whispered, "I asked if I did something wrong." That question alone told me what they had done to her. Because children don't ask that unless an adult made them feel the answer might be yes. She told me Grandma said your mother knows why. I did not know why. Lily stood there holding the cookies she had made for them. And when no one moved, she apologized for something she didn't understand, for some offense no one would even name. Then the door closed, and my 11-year-old walked home alone with her birthday gift in her hands and shame in her chest. She let herself into an empty house, sat at the kitchen table, waited, didn't touch the cupcake and had left didn't touch the cupcake I had left for later because she thought maybe the day could still be fixed if she was patient enough. An hour later, while I was still at work, she sent me that text. "I came home. I hope I'm not in trouble." So tell me, what kind of grandparents do that on a child's birthday? I found out, and when I did, I didn't call them screaming. I did something much worse. What do you say to your child when the first thing they need from you on their birthday is proof they are still loved? That was the question waiting for me when I opened my front door. Lily was sitting exactly where I knew she would be, at the kitchen table, back straight, hands folded too neatly in her lap, the yellow dress still on, the ribbon still in her hair. The gift bag she'd carried to my parents' house sat beside her chair untouched. The cookies were still inside. She hadn't even taken them out. The house was quiet in a way I will never forget. Not peaceful, not normal. It was the kind of silence that happens when a child has spent too long trying not to make things worse. When she looked up at me, she tried to smile. That nearly broke me more than if she had burst into tears. I put my purse down, crossed the kitchen, and crouched beside her. Hey, I said, and even to my own ears, my voice sounded too careful. You are not in trouble. The second I said that, her shoulders dropped, just a little, but enough to tell me she had been carrying that fear for hours. Okay, she whispered. Okay, as if that settled it. As if children are supposed to recover from humiliation just because one adult finally says the right sentence. I asked if she wanted to tell me what happened, not because I didn't believe her text, but because I needed to hear how they had framed it. There's a difference between cruelty and calculated cruelty, and deep down, I already knew my parents had crossed that line. Lily swallowed and started small. Grandpa opened the door. She spoke the way kids do when they are trying to stay accurate, as if precision might somehow protect them. She said, my father, Richard, looked annoyed before she even said hello. She said, my mother, Eliane, was standing behind him like she had been waiting. She said they didn't look surprised to see her, they looked prepared. That word landed hard. Prepared? What did Grandpa say? I asked gently. Lily stared at the table. She said I couldn't come in. And then she said birthdays don't erase behavior. The room seemed to tilt for a second. Not because I didn't recognize the style, I did. That was exactly how my mother talked when she wanted to sound righteous while being cruel. It was the wording that chilled me. Adult language, disciplinary language. The kind meant to make a child feel like they had already been a trial somewhere she didn't know about and she had lost. Did she tell you what behavior? I asked. Lily shook her head. No. I asked if I did something, and Grandpa said, you've been told enough. She hadn't. Of course, she hadn't. That was the trick. Use certainty to replace reality. Make the child doubt herself before she can question you. My parents had done versions of that to me my whole life. The difference was that now they had done it to my daughter on her birthday, and they had done it while she stood alone on their porch with no adult beside her. Then Lily said the sentence I had been dreading. She asked if you were finally going to make me respect family. There it was, not the whole truth, but enough of it to show the shape of the truth. This hadn't been random. It had been a bad mood or some bizarre misunderstanding. They were sending me a message. They had just used Lily to do it. I took her hands in mine. They were cold. Listen to me, I said. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Do you understand? She nodded, but not fully. Kids want to believe their parents, but shame is sticky. It doesn't come off in one sentence. Then she asked the question that lodged itself somewhere permanent in me. Did you really know they didn't want me there? For 1 second, I couldn't speak. Not because I didn't know the answer, because I heard what was underneath it. She wasn't only asking whether I had known, she was asking whether I had sent her there anyway, whether I had known she would be rejected and decided she could handle it. No, I said immediately. No, Lily, I would never do that to you. Her face changed then, just enough for me to see that she believed me. And the moment she did, the rest of the emotion rushed in behind it. Her eyes filled, she looked embarrassed, like crying might be another mistake, and turned her face away. I wrapped my arms around her and let her cry. While she cried, my mind started moving fast, backward first. The previous weekend had been tense. That much I knew now. We'd had dinner at my parents' house, and when it was time to leave, Lily had stepped back when my mother leaned in for a kiss. Not rudely, not dramatically, just a child following her own instincts. She'd said, polite as ever, I don't feel like hugs right now. I had backed her up without hesitation. That's fine, I'd say. You can say goodbye however you want. My mother's face had tightened. My father had gone silent in that dangerous way he did when he thought authority was slipping. At the time, I thought the awkwardness would pass. Now, sitting in my kitchen table with my daughter's tears soaking into my shirt, I realized it hadn't passed at all. It had grown teeth. I stood up once Lily had calmed down and reached for my phone. My hand was steadier than I expected. That should have scared me more than it did because I wasn't confused anymore. I was starting to understand exactly what my parents had done. And once I checked my messages, I found the first piece of proof that made my blood run cold. The moment I found the text, this stopped being a family misunderstanding and became evidence. That's the thing about manipulative people. They get sloppy when they believe they are morally right. They don't hide what they've done because, in their minds, they've done nothing wrong. They think they are teaching, correcting, protecting, and that certainty, that's what exposes them. I stood in my kitchen with Lady upstairs washing her face, and I opened my message thread with my mother. There it was, sent at 11:43 that morning while I was in a meeting, and Lily was probably still working there in that yellow dress. Maybe today she'll learn to arrive with the right attitude. I read it once, then again. My mother hadn't been confused. She hadn't panicked. She hadn't forgotten Lily was coming. She knew exactly what she was doing before my daughter even reached the porch. That message didn't explain anything, but it confirmed that most important part, this had been planned. And once I had that, the rest started lining up fast. I went upstairs and found Lily sitting on the edge of her bed, dabbing on her face with a towel like she was trying to erase the day. I sat beside her and asked one more question carefully. When Grandpa and Grandma were upset last weekend, was it because you didn't hug them goodbye? Lily looked at me uncertain. Maybe. That one word told me she remembered the moment but not the significance. To her, it had been small, a boundary, a feeling, a normal thing. To my parents, apparently, it had been a challenge. And now, I finally understood the whole ugly picture. A week earlier, when we left my parents' house after dinner, my mother had opened her arms for one of her performative goodbye hugs. Lily hesitated. She had never liked being pushed into affection or command, and I had spent years teaching her something I wish someone had taught me young. Your body belongs to you. You can be kind without surrendering your comfort. You can love people without offering physical affection whenever they demand it. So Lily had stepped back and given a small wave instead. Bye, Grandma. Bye, Grandpa. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Lillian had gone cold instantly. Excuse me? Lily froze. I remember touching her shoulder and saying slightly, she doesn't have to hug if she doesn't want to. My father, Richard, gave me that stare he'd perfected over decades. The one meant to take disagreement feel like disrespect. You're encouraging this? Yes, I said, I am. My mother had laughed then, but not because anything was funny. So now basic manners are optional? No, I said. forced affection is. That had been the real argument, not over manners, over control. They saw Lily's boundaries as disobedience. Worse, they saw my support of that boundary as betrayal. In their minds, I had chosen my daughter's autonomy over their authority, and they were not going to let that pass unanswered. So they invited her over for her birthday anyway. That was the sickest part. They could have sulked, complained, fought with me directly. Instead, they waited until she arrived alone, until there were no witness, until an 11-year-old stood at their doorstep expecting cake and candles and was vulnerable enough to be taught. I looked at Lily and kept my voice steady. You were not rude last weekend. She said nothing. You did not disrespect them. Still nothing. You are allowed to say no to hugs. This time she looked at me fully. Even to family? That's right. Right there. That was the damage. Because in just a few hours, my parents had managed to drag her into the same confusion I had spent years crawling out of. The idea that family love comes with access, that saying no makes you bad, that rejection is the price of boundaries. Yes, I said, especially to family. I let that sit. Then I stood, walked back downstairs, and started making calls. First, my younger brother Owen, 32. He and I didn't always agree about our parents, but he knew exactly how they operated. He answered on the second ring, heard my voice, and said what happened. I told him enough to make him go silent, then angry, then very, very useful. He told me he had gotten a voicemail from our mother an hour earlier complaining that Lily was being allowed to become cold and defiant. He didn't listen at all of it because he was at work. I told him to save it and send me a copy immediately. Next, I called my cousin Marisa, 40. She lived 2 streets over from my parents and knew Lily's walking route. She had seen Lily on the sidewalk that afternoon, alone, carrying a bag, looking down. That gave me a timestamp and a witness. Then I took a screenshot of everything, my mother's text, the missed call, the times, the thread from the last weekend where I had explicitly said Lily would never be forced to give physical affection to anyone. I emailed the screenshots to myself, then backed them up again because suddenly I understood that people like my parents rewrite history the second the sense exposure. Finally, I called my mother. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I didn't give her the gift of hearing me lose control. I said very calmly, we are going to discuss what happened tonight. She paused, probably expecting panic and getting something she couldn't immediately read. Then she said, almost smirkly, good, because this has gone far enough. That told me everything I needed to know. She still thought she held the moral high ground. She still thought I was coming to be corrected, maybe apologize, maybe negotiate, maybe agree that Lily needed to be humbled. I almost pitied her for how wrong she was. Because while she was talking, I was already building the room she was going to walk into. Not a screaming match, not chaos, not something much more worse for people like Elian and Richard witnesses. I told Owen to come over that evening. I asked Marisa to be there if she was willing. I called Daniel, Lily's father, 38, who lived nearby and whatever our history, loved his daughter fiercely. He was at my house within 30 minutes, white-faced with anger, ready to stay with Lily while I handled the rest. By 6 o'clock, I had a folder of screenshots, one saved voicemail, two witnesses, and a certainty that made me feel strangely calm. Then my mother sent One more message. She needs discipline. You can't shield her from consequences forever. Consequences? For not hugging them? I stared at that word for a long moment, then hit print because my parents still thought this evening would end with me defending my daughters in private. They had no idea I was about to make them explain themselves loud. 5 hours after they shut the door on my daughter, my parents came home expecting a private conversation. What they got instead stopped them cold on the threshold. I was standing in the living room when I heard Richard's key in the lock. Calm, too calm. That metallic click echoed through the house like the start of something final. Owen was seated on the far end of the couch, elbows on his knees, jaw tight. Marissa sat in the armchair by the window, hands folded, expression unreadable in the way only people who know a family too well can manage. Daniel stood near the dining table, not pacing, not speaking, just radiating the kind of controlled anger that makes a room feel smaller. And on the dining table, arranged in a plain sight, were the things my parents would recognize before they even fully understood what they were seeing. Printed screenshots, a yellow gift bag, a tin of untouched birthday cakes, and in the center, still in its box, a small chocolate cake with unlit candles. The door opened. My mother stepped in first, paused over her shoulder, already wearing that irritated expression she used whenever she believes someone else had created unnecessary drama. My father came in behind her, saw the room, and stopped so abruptly he almost bumped into her. No one spoke for long, sharp seconds. Then Eliane said, "What is all this?" Not fear, not yet, annoyance. That was the thing about my mother. She could walk into a disaster of her own making and still begin from the assumption that she was the one being inconvenienced. Richard's eyes moved from Owen to Marissa to Daniel, then landed on the papers spread across the table. Why are people here? I didn't answer right away. Silence is useful when people expect to control tempo. It forces them to sit inside the scene instead of directing it. Finally, I said, because what you did to Lily today is not something you get to explain away in private. That landed. Not fully, but enough. My mother set her purse down slowly. I think you're being dramatic. Daniel let out a short breath through his nose, almost a laugh, but without humor. Owen looked at the floor, shook his head once, and said nothing. Marissa's expression didn't move at all. I stepped aside so they could see the table clearly. The screenshots were arranged in order, my mother's messages from that morning, the text from last weekend, the timestamps, a short written timeline. Nothing theoretical, just methodical, clear, the kind of presentation that says this is no longer about feelings alone. My father drew himself up the way he always did when he sensed challenge. If this is about discipline, then yes, we need to have a conversation. There it was again. Discipline. He said it with the confidence of someone who thought the world itself would justify whatever came after it. I looked at him and asked, what exactly did my 11-year-old do that deserved being turned away on her birthday and sent home alone? My mother answered first. Don't twist it. She was not sent away. She was told to go home and think. Daniel took one step forward, just one. She is 11. Eliane turned toward him, offended by his tone instead of what she had just admitted. And that one word shifted the room. You could feel it, the exact instant when even the people most prepared for her to minimize what happened realized how far gone her logic actually was. Owen finally looked up. You made Lily walk home by herself after inviting her there for her birthday? My father breezed through it. She knows the route. Marisa spoke for the first time, voice cold and flat. That wasn't the question. Richard hated being challenged by people he considered secondary in the family hierarchy. I saw it in the way his mouth tightened. He turned back to me instead. This is exactly the problem, Vanessa. You've made that child believe she can decide when basic respect applies. I said nothing. He kept going because people like him always talk longer when they mistake quiet for weakness. She refused affection from her grandmother in a cold, performative way. Then you reinforced it. You embarrassed your mother in her own home. There has to be a line. A line? As though Lily had staged a rebellion instead of declining a hawk. As though bodily autonomy were some radical insult. My mother folded her arms. Children do not get to dictate the terms of family affection. That is not how stable family work. Daniel stared at her. You hear yourself, right? She ignored him and kept her eyes on me. You have been filling her head with selfishness, boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. She is 11. She needs guardians, not power. That sentence told me two things. First, they were not going to apologize voluntarily. Second, they still believed the room might be persuaded. So I reached for the first page on the table and lifted it. Then let's be accurate. I said, at 11:43 a.m. before Lily arrived, you texted me. Maybe today should learn to arrive with the right attitude. I read it aloud exactly as written. No one moved. My mother's face changed first. Not into remorse, not into calculation. She understood suddenly that I had not come armed with outrage, I had come armed with records. That message is being taken out of context, she said immediately. Great, I said. Then give us the context. She opened her mouth and closed it. Richard stepped in. The context is that she has been having disrespectful and no one is correcting it except us. I set the page down and picked up the next one. And when Lily asked what she had done wrong, you told her birthdays don't erase behavior. What behavior exactly? Neither of them answered because now we were in dangerous territory for them. Specifics. Specifics kill people like this. General principles are where they thrive. Morality, tradition, respect, values. But the second you force them to describe the actual act, an 11-year-old not wanting a hawk, the grandeur collapses. Daniel spoke up again, quieter this time, which somehow made it sharper. Say it plainly. My mother looked at him, then at me, then finally said, she refused her grandmother. No one in the room reacted for a bit, maybe because the sentence was even uglier than expected. Refused her grandmother? Like Lily was denying tribute to royalty. Marisa glanced at the yellow gift bag on the table and then back at Eliane. So you invited her over for cake and turned her away because she didn't want to hug you last weekend? It was not just the hug, Eliane snapped. It was the attitude behind it. There it was, the contradiction. They wanted obedience, but because obedience sounded ugly, they kept trying to rename it. I walked to the table and lifted a tin of cookie. She made these for you last night. My mother looked at the tin and then away. I opened it, exposing the uneven frosting and the crushed sprinkles and the kind of effort children pour into things without yet understanding that adults can be unworthy of it. She spent the morning excited to show you what she bought. I said. She put on her favorite dress. She walked to your house believing you wanted to celebrate her, and you stood at the door and made her feel like she was bad. My father's voice hardened. Because actions have consequence, I turned to Owen. Play the voicemail. My brother took out his phone. For the first time that evening, both of my parents looked genuinely uncertain. Not scared yet, but close. Owen tapped the screen, lifted the volume, and said, "This is what mom left at 1:06." The room went still. As the audio began, I watched my mother realize whatever story she thought she could still manage was about to collapse in her own voice. The room changed before the voicemail even finished. That's not what I remembered. That's what I remembered most. Not just the words themselves, though, I could still recite them. Not just my mother's voice, clipped and self righteous, almost bored, as if she were leaving an entire reasonable update instead of documenting cruelty. It was the way every person in that room seemed to understand at the exact same moment that there was no softer explanation coming. Owen held the phone steady on the table as Eliana's record voice filled the living room. I am not going to argue about this all day. Lily needed to learn that celebration is not automatic. When she's been disrespectful, if she wants warmth from this family, she can stop acting above basic affection. Sending her home gave her time to think, which frankly she needed. Vanessa may not want to teach her consequence, but someone has to. No distortion, no ambiguity, no room left for interpretation. If she wants warmth from the family, that was the line that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. Because suddenly the entire story was sitting there in plain sight, not hidden inside euphemism like manners or discipline or family values. My mother had said exactly what she believed. Love, access, celebration, even basic welcomes were conditional, earned through obedience, maintained through compliance, withdrawn the moment a child exercised autonomy she didn't approve of. And she said it about an 11-year-old on her birthday. The voicemail ended. No one moved. Then Marisa, who had spent the whole evening composed, almost to a point of coldness, said quietly, "That is vile." Eliane snapped towards her. "Oh, don't be dramatic." But the force was gone now. You could hear it. The authority she wore like armor had cracked. Not because she felt remorse. She didn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. It cracked because the audience had changed. She wasn't speaking to a child she could shame or a daughter she thought she could overwhelm. She was speaking in front of adults with receipts, and for once, for once, her usual language sounded exactly as ugly as it was. Daniel spoke next. His voice was low and dangerously controlled. "You used my daughter's birthday to punish her for not wanting physical affection from you?" My father jumped in too quickly. "That's not what happened." I turned to him. "Then tell me what happened." He opened his mouth and gave me the same desperate version of the argument he had been trying to shape all evening. Respect, attitude, defiance, social norms, basic family decency. Every word carefully chosen to avoid the one truth underneath all of it. Lily had said no, and they could not tolerate it. So I said to him, "She didn't want to hug you goodbye last weekend. I supported her. You decided that she meant you decided that meant she needed to be humbled. You invited her over, waited until she was standing there alone, told her she couldn't come inside, implied I improved implied I approved of it and sent her walking home by herself. That is what happened. No one contradicted me, not even them. The silence was the logical payoff to every question that had been hanging since the beginning of the day. Why had Lily thought she was in trouble? Because they told her she had done something wrong. They had said I knew because it made the rejection hurt more and made her doubt herself. Why was there no call, no warning, no concern for safety? Because this was never a misunderstanding, it was a lesson, pre planned, deliberate, and cruel. My mother looked at the cake on the table and then at me, almost annoyed that I was forcing the emotional reality into view. You are all acting as if we harmed her. That was the moment something inside me went from fury to absolute clarity. Not louder, clearer. I had spent years waiting for my parents to become the kind of people who could reason into empathy if I just used the right words. But there are moments when a person reveals not only what they've done, but the shape of what they are willing to justify. This was one of those moments. Yes, I said, you didn't harm her. She rolled her eyes, and Owen actually flinched like he couldn't believe she would do that there. Now, after hearing herself on that voicemail, I kept going. She sat alone in my house on her birthday, thinking she might be in trouble. She apologized to you without knowing what she was apologizing for. She asked me if I knew you didn't want her there. So, yes, you harmed her. For the first time, Richard's expression shifted into something less rigid, not remorse, alarm. He could see where this was going. And unlike unlike my mother, he understood reputation, optics, and social consequence. He understood that what happened in that room would not simply evaporate because he wanted it to. Vanessa, he said, trying to soften his tone. This does not need to become a larger issue. It was almost laughable. A larger issue? As if the size of the issue were the problem, not the act itself. Daniel let out a short breath and looked away, the way people do when they need 1 second to keep from saying something they can't take back. Marisa crossed one leg over the other and said, it's already a larger issue. You made it. Then Owen, who had been the most hesitant for years to openly challenge our parents, leaned forward and said the sentence I never thought I would hear from him. You owe Lily an apology. But honestly, I didn't think that's enough. They landed that landed hard because it came from him, from the son who had spent so much of his life minimizing, avoiding, surviving. My parents looked at him as though betrayal had changed shape and burrowed his face. My mother's response was immediate and terrible. I would not grovel to a child. Daniel laughed once, harsh, disbelieving. There it is, and there it was. Not ambiguity left. No final hidden layer. They did not believe Lily was a child who deserved repair. They believed she was a subordinate who had overstepped. I looked at both of them and laid out the consequence plainly. You will not be alone with Lily again. Elaine coughed, but I didn't stop. You will not contact her directly. If you need to say anything, say it to me in writing. Richard's face hardened. You can't be serious. I am very serious. I pointed to the papers on the table. You knowingly turned away an 11-year-old you had invited, let her walk home alone, and lied by implication that I was part of it. I had screenshots. I had a witness who saw her walking home. I had a voicemail in your own words. If either of you decides to harass, threaten, or manipulate this situation further, I am fully prepared to document everything and escalate it. That was as close as I needed to get to the naming layers. Police reports, custody documentation, and safety consultations. I did not need theatrics. I needed them to understand that I was no longer operating inside the old family system where they could injure someone and then bully everyone into treating it as a private business. The shift after that was immediate, not repentance fallout. Marisa stood up first and said she was leaving because she had heard enough. But before she walked out, she looked directly at Elian and said, "You don't get to call this love." Then Owen got to his feet and, after a long silence, told our parents he would not be attending Sunday dinner that week or any week soon. "Not until you understand what you did," he said, "and right now I don't think you even want to." That one hurt them, I could tell. My father tried to reassert control one last time, so everyone is turning against us now. No one answered because that question, like all the others, was built to erase the cause and spotlight only their discomfort. And for once, no one let him do it. I gathered the papers, took the gift bags, and picked up the tin of cookies and the cake and said, "This conversation is over." My mother called after me as Daniel and I headed for the door. "You are blowing this out of proportion." I turned back just once. "No, I'm ending it before it becomes a pattern." That was the emotional payoff for me. Not a triumphant speech, not revenge in a cinematic sense, something steadier, harder won. The moment I stopped trying to convince them to be different and started protecting Lily as if their change no longer mattered, because it didn't, not as much as she did. When I got home, Lily was in the den under a blanket. Though the room wasn't cold, she looked up the second I walked in, searching my face the way children do when they are trying to read whether the wall is safer now than it was a few hours ago. I sat beside her and set the blanket aside so I could hold her hands. "Listen to me," I said. "I need you to hear this clearly. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Not today. Not last weekend. Not by saying no to a hug. Not by coming home. None of this was your fault." Her eyes filled immediately, but this time she didn't hide it. "Really?" "Yes," I said, "really." Then I told her the part that mattered most. No one, not even family, gets to punish you for having boundaries with your own body. She started crying, then for real. Not the tired, embarrassed tears from earlier, but the kind that came when fear finally has somewhere to go. I held her while she cried, and for the first time that day, I let myself cry too, quietly, into her hair, into the top of that yellow dress that she should have been wearing to a happy memory. When the tears passed, I stood up, brought the cake into the room, and asked, "Do you still want the candles?" She gave this tiny, uncertain nod. So we lit them. Just the three of us, me, Lily, and Daniel, standing around the coffee table with a cake that should have been cut hours earlier. The candles burned steadily. Lily closed her eyes before making a wish, and for one painful second, I wondered whether my parents had stolen birthdays from her forever, whether this day would override something soft in her. Then she opened her eyes and smiled. Not the same smile from that morning. It was smaller, wiser, maybe, but real. We sang off key, a little teary, and entirely ours. That private celebration mattered more than any lunch my parents could have staged because it gave the day back to her. Not completely. Some things leave marks, but not enough. Enough to teach a different lesson than the one they tried to impose. That humiliation can be answered with protection. That love does not vanish when you assert yourself that the adults who deserve a place in your life are the ones who make room for your no. In the days that followed, the consequences kept unfolding. My mother sent two texts that looked like apologies from far away but collapsed on contact. The first said she was the first said she was sorry Lily's feelings were hurt, which told me everything it needed to about accountability. The second said that while her methods may have been misunderstood, her intentions had been loving. I did not respond. My father sent one email asking to reset things as a family and warning against letting one emotional overreaction create permanent division. I kept that too, filed with the rest. Owen stayed distant from them. Marissa did too. A few extended relatives heard some versions of what happened, and for once, the story didn't drift in my parents' favor because the facts were too ugly and too specific. There was no dramatic accusation to debate, just an invited child, a shut door, a walk home, and a voicemail. I also documented everything formally, not because I wanted a war, because I wanted a record, date, time, screenshots, and witness names. I spoke to a few attorneys for advice on what to preserve in case my parents escalate to try to involve themselves through school or relatives. I made sure Lily's father had copies too. Safety is something boring on paper, quite procedural, but that is how real protection often looks. Personally, the change was even bigger. The old version of me would have spent weeks asking whether I had been too harsh, whether there was a gentler path, whether my family required one more chance. But something about seeing Lily at the table in her birthday dress had burned through that reflex for good. My life changed because I stopped organizing it around my parents' comfort. And Lily changed too, though not in the way they wanted. A week later, we were leaving bookstore when an elderly cashier leaned in for a pat on the shoulder and Lily instinctively stepped back. Then she looked at me checking. I smiled and said, "You are allowed." She smiled back. That was the resolution, not dramatic, not loud, just a child learning that the lesson had held, that the safe adult still meant what she said, that her boundaries did not cause abandonment. A month after her birthday, Lily tapped one of the photos from our little makeup celebrations to the side of the fridge. In it, she in mid-laughed candle smoke curling upward, frosting on the tip of her thumb. She never knew from the picture what earlier in the day. Maybe that's the best ending I could give her. Not one where nothing bad happened, one where the bad thing failed to define her. My parents thought shifting my parents thought shutting a door on my daughter would teach her who held the power. All it really did was show me exactly which door I needed to close and which one I would spend the rest of my life keeping open for her.